and I'm dancing to Taylor Swift wearing this Soviet MiG pilot helmet and smoking a cigar and just.
All right, we're in it now.
Yeah, it says live. Here's the clap. Now I can sync the cameras.
Ooh,
this got fancy. Vader, is it your intro or is it Bender's intro? I don't think it's mine.
Gosh. I think I know I did the Billy episode intro.
That's
so
right.
It's definitely not me.
So it's Bender.
I thought I was removed from doing intros.
No. Well, it's Rain's call.
I think
it's going to talk about Satan, even though I don't know anything about him. So I'll just make some stuff up.
Yeah, I don't think it's my call at all, but I do think it's Bender's intro.
Has this started?
Yeah, it started. We're 30 seconds in.
Yeah, I was thinking the video thing from before. But hey, welcome everybody to Bro Chat Volume 9. Maybe we shouldn't call them volumes either anymore. We got a lot of stuff we got to talk about.
A lot of admin.
Yeah,
a lot of admin.
Stuff. Yeah, but we got Rain here as per the usual, and Vader who's struggling through his TX. So we're gonna hear a little bit about that in a bit. And our special guest today is Satan, Dan Levy, right? Or is it Levi?
Levy, close enough. All good.
Levy, dang it. All right,
Satan's fine.
Clap again.
Hard E or soft E. What is that? I don't know how that works.
This is why intros are tough.
That's like the guy on the TV show that everybody likes, Schitt's Creek. Same dude.
There you go. Yeah, well, Satan is well known in the fighter pilot community for stirring up. I don't want to say trouble, but he brings. Everybody's thinking it. Not everybody's saying it. Satan says it. So I'm excited to hear what we got going on today. But thanks to Rain's Patreon supporters again. That's the third time. So you guys go ahead and make your way over to the Kodiak Shack podcast website. And one day we're going to put a little Patreon link on there for you. It'll be a surprise. And then, feel free to donate. But let's go. Let's start. Vader, go with your TX updates.
All right. Well, before I do that, I want to say thank you to everybody. People have started making comments on our YouTube videos and stuff. So I've been trying to check that stuff out. Bender, you got to start looking because they're asking for more Bender, like I passed you offline. So that's great. So we appreciate that for all the people who enjoy Kodiak Shack and the videos and everything. So TX update. Normally, so people who have not gone through formal upgrades, or like any sort of pilot training stuff, what ends up happening is there are multiple people in the hopper or multiple classes in the hopper of different people. And what ends up happening, the courses ebb and flow. So you'll have a week where you have almost nothing going on. And then you have weeks where you're like, man, this seems like we could have kind of peanut butter spread this training out. But that's just the way the military kind of trains, because having a bunch of people available. So I am at the point where we are full bore into all the training. And so it went from like 2 events a week to like 3 events a day. So now we're hitting up a lot of the sims. We're getting into the tactical side of the F-15C, which means there are a lot of similarities to Viper tactics. And then there are some departures that get me in trouble rather quickly. So we were, did you guys, for everybody who flew the Viper, I don't know if the 35 has them, the uplooks for like the uplook puffers. Did you guys ever use them?
Oh, I did. No, like you would never, for the gimmicks, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in the B course.
Never used it.
Yeah. Like you synced it once, right? Or like calibrated it once.
Yeah. You had to calibrate it like separately. And
never.
So it's in the C model, they use it more. They kind of lean on it more. And maybe it's because I'm at the FTU. And so we train to it, but I'm like, nah, I don't know how, because what I end up doing for everybody who hasn't used it, it's like this little like display that you can kind of just like point at the bad guy if he's in certain places and try to shoot him with an off-bore sight heat-seeking missile. But the problem is when I try to point at the bad guy, I end up stop flying the jet. So then I'm like, go from like 300 knots to like 450 knots as I'm trying to shoot this missile. I'm like, I'm not even fighting BFM. Like, yeah, I should just like pull the point at him. And
right.
So stuff like that. And then one other thing, I was in the sim. I did the standard trainee thing. Drago Walters, he was on the show previously. He says that being a wingman is a qual. like if you're a flight lead, if you're an IP, you're not a wingman because you don't do the wingman thing. And sure enough, I'm trying to shoot all my missiles, and I don't look at my element mate. We're in the sim, luckily, and we get 0.2 nautical miles away from one another while we're at about 40,000 feet. So, which is about like 10 to 12,000 ish feet away from each other, or 10 to 1,200 feet away, or 1,000 to 1,200 feet.
Hard, yeah.
It's the early morning. We're working off the East
Monday
Coast
morning.
times. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we were rather close. I mean, I could have read his lineup card in the simulator. So that was a rough way to start the sim. But overall, learning new things every day, and expected contact range in even the worst of the Eagle radars is pretty darn nice. So doing that work on the top half of the scope is pretty easy. But that's what I got.
You're all mech scan in the FTU, right?
Yep. Yeah, you'll do. There are a couple V3s, so the AESA radars, which are like the real fancy new ones. But most of what we live fly is mech scan, like what's called the V0.
I only did WIC support for one Eagle TI sortie, which was the most excruciating experience of my life. The debrief with like every minute, like you have to go capture where you are in space, what you're doing, so that you can come back. And while the digital footprint and technology exists to like get through this in about 5 minutes, like, no, we're going to take an hour and a half to go through and ask every single person at every single minute where they are and if the chalk drawing is as depicted. But I remember that one we did, it was Sort North. He wasn't a brand new wingman, right? But he was, I don't know, maybe 6 months out of like MQT, and he had a 188 pod on his jet, and he was like the low dude. And Eagles just straight bonsai, like wall of 8 ship, and Sort just wrecked house. Like he killed like 3 of them. It's like, this shouldn't happen, but Sort, the hero he was, still is.
Good for him.
Yeah, just destroyed those Eagles. But they made it even better for the debrief.
Jammers are, you can ask an electrical engineer, which I am definitely not. But jammers, they've got a pretty sweet job. They can just go out and just be like, I'm just going to ruin the lives of some radars out there. And turns out it works pretty darn well,
Yeah. I mean, it's nice when your sole existence in life for that sortie was just to go wreck house, and you didn't really have to worry about anything else, just to make their life miserable. And he did. So I'm sure that WUG, the weapon school upgradee, spent the next 18 hours of his life going through that debrief of what happened, and then probably got to see it again. So that sounds great. I don't know.
Yeah, he's better for it, I'm sure.
Yeah. I was really impressed with the Super Hornet, their radar, because we would in Misawa we would integrate with the Growlers, which is the same radar. But then also talking to Super Hornets, I was at McIntyre doing kind of red air swaps for Growlers, or not Growlers, but Super Hornets, and we had a jamming pod, I think, on one of the jets as we were red air for this Super Hornet guy who was a backseat Super Hornet dude getting his flight lead upgrade. And he is in the debrief, and he's like, did you guys have any jamming? And I think we were like, yeah. And he's like, and looks at his IP, and he's like, what does jamming look like? Because apparently the radar just like works through jamming. Like he'd never experienced jamming. He just like sees everything with this radar. And I assume that's how the 35 is. Bender, have you ever seen like jamming where you're like, oh, like that's challenging?
Only from other F-35s, yeah. So we kind of wreck shop on each other, which is kind of fun.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. The F-16 is super good at that too. Co-channel interference will get you.
Yeah.
You know who doesn't have to worry about jamming? Satan.
Right here. Exactly.
Way you guys easier. At least can jam, right? Do you guys carry 184 pods?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
If you don't have a radar to jam, man, it's no big deal. You can't jam the paper map that I'm navigating on, dude. It's pretty great. It's easy. Just look outside. Piece of cake.
They'll get lasers and melt the wax pens and stuff.
Yeah, that's what we should
yeah. Do you use grease pencils on the canopy? Are you one of those guys?
It's kind of a lost art. I haven't really done it in a while. I use it in the B course for like references for like where you're going to put your plane of motion and stuff on for the jet for new guys. But Yeah, it's kind of a thing that's gone away a little bit just because you can't really do that at night effectively. We've got so many lights and lip lights and all the other nice stuff. But old school guys definitely still do it for sure.
Lip lights, that's a sensitive subject around Vader. So
I'm sure.
Yeah, the last bro chat, which isn't out yet, but by the time this releases, it will be out. There's a lip light discussion. I don't know. If I didn't have a lip light, I would not be able to fly.
Oh yeah,
unable.
That's a measle item.
Yeah,
I should not have flown.
But. Yeah, that's super dangerous and really risky. I don't know. I couldn't venture. But we got Satan on the podcast, which is fun for the bro chat. Again, Bender kind of mentioned it. Satan tends to just call it the way he sees it. There is a fighter pilot group on Facebook that there's a lot of discussion that happens back and forth. And usually when some shenanigans go down, Satan is like the first one to call it the way he sees it and gets everyone to chime in. My favorite and most recent right now, I guess not favorite, but the most recent is the master's degree. I posted about this a little bit. For those who don't know, there was a point in time where the Air Force required you to have a master's to become a major or a lieutenant colonel. And it didn't matter what your master's was in. You would think like, hey, I'm gonna get a master's in some kind of area of expertise that will make me better at doing my primary job. But no, this is not the case. It's viewed as just checking the box, so to speak, just so you can get promoted. It went away, and this is an effort to, I think, help fighter pilot or just pilot retention in the beginning or period, because you're like, I don't need a master's degree to go out and fly a jet. So that went away, and then late breaking, was it December 29th?
Yep.
Come effective 1 January, master's degrees are back in. And so there are a lot of us, there might be 3 of us sitting here that are meeting promotion boards that if you took the word of the Air Force, like, hey, you're good, surprise. Now, while the memo says like, want you to value it, it always divulges like, well, he has a master's degree, she doesn't, so he's getting promoted or vice versa. So I don't know. I think we should talk about master's degrees. Satan, you had some good points that were brought up, and it stirred the pot right off the get-go about master's degrees.
Yeah, no, I like to think of myself as the guy that writes the Jerry Maguire manifesto, the things we think and do not say. I actually, try to say them at least in an online form occasionally. But no, I think this is one of those things where it's, yeah, you want people to get more educated in general. Sure, that's a good thing. That's a good idea. And there are certain jobs in the Air Force where you want to have that level of expertise for sure. Definitely in the developmental test, engineering, those kinds of things in the civilian sector, you want to have long-term, high educated people, thinking up all the fancy stuff that we're going to go out and fly around and break, Yep. But the huge downside that you alluded to is it's just going to crush dudes who are already doing way more with less, being asked to do even more with less time, resources, what have you, flying hours, etc. And it's just going to make people more vulnerable to not getting promoted. Because like you said, the promotion board system that we have, I think is fundamentally flawed in a lot of ways. And when you've got a bunch of people on the board just kind of comparing promotion recommendation folders and everything to one another, they're just gonna look at the container and says, oh, this guy's got a master's, this person doesn't. No, that's easy. And one person's going to get promoted based off of crackerjack masters or whatever, and the other person isn't, even if they might be way better suited for command or higher rank in the Air Force. It's frustrating for sure.
Do you have your master's? Who has their master's here?
Not me.
Bachelor's plus. I went and got bachelor's plus for my majors board, 7-8 years ago, and then I quit because I was like, all right, this is good enough for me. I never really had any aspirations or thoughts of making lieutenant colonel. So that's where I stopped.
If anyone has any questions about emergency management, I am a master in emergency management. So that's very, very useful when it comes to operating airplanes.
Yeah. It's funny because I have so many questions, because it's not surprising. They just threw it out end game and they just said like, in 2 days, this is now a requirement, where you can't even say like, hey, in 2 promotion boards or something, like in the time it would take someone to get a master's if they wanted to check that container now that it's like unmasked. They didn't even give you that time. And I've talked to one guy, so most of us know him, Tron. He made ViperOps solid mission planning website. But he went to the Air Force Academy. The Air Force sent him to go get his master's. And so he's got a really good perspective because he's one of the people who has his master's, and he has it in something that is like a challenging thing. It's not like some BS master's.
And it's from MIT, isn't it? Didn't he go to MIT?
I think University of Boston. So
Boston. So
that was sweet.
There.
You kind of undercut him there, making him look
near
bad.
MIT. But yeah,
dang it. Cut that out. Edit. This is edit point.
But the ISTEAM University is Boston. Boston is also good. But there's many people who go to Harvard or MIT or University of Boston or all these places who get legit masters, and they don't get credit. They not that they don't get credit, but they end up going. They're late rated because they spend 2 years getting a master's, and so their argument would be, and I'll be devil's advocate or maybe Satan's advocate. Maybe that doesn't count because I'm on the other side of this, but they're saying like, hey, I did this master's. It's a good master's, and I don't really get any props for it. But I think the problem is like, it's the implementation. It's not the fact that you can see whether someone has a master's. Like Satan said, like, is it just going to be a rote, you have a master's, you get promoted, and then do you not get a definitely promote or what's known as a DP on a promotion board from a wing commander? Like, do those things change too now that you don't have a master's? Because my understanding is that's how it was back in 2010, 11, 12, before they got rid of it. It was kind of like it would color the way you got your push off your base. It would color the way the board looked at it. So do you guys know how that is expected to play out? Do you think it's just going to be rinse and repeat of the old days?
I think from the group commander and wing commander up, they've always been able to see if you have your master's or not. And that was one thing I remember actually going to SOS, the Squadron Officer School, when this was being discussed and implemented to get rid of or to mask the masters. And the commandant, I don't remember who the guy was, but I wasn't super impressed. He's like, I value masters. I can still see that. So that's going to be how that is going to be a part of the calculus when it comes to racking, stacking people off base. In my mind, like, sweet, the chief of staff of the Air Force, like 1 week ago said, we're going to value masters that are appropriate, right? Getting some kind of technical one if you're in a technical career field, but like, I don't need a master's to go fly a jet. But he basically said like, here's a middle finger, chief. I think this is really important, so I'm going to do it. Teach his own. So I don't think, honestly, that has really changed, and that could have always been part of it. But I think, I don't know, here's an assumption that most group commanders and wing commanders took that direction and they valued it appropriately. Maybe it was somewhere in the calculus, but now, and I don't know how the promotion boards work. I know it's now been split up between like line Air Force and, ops, etc. So maybe it won't have that much of an impact, but the fact that, yeah, in game, you're like, hey, surprise, and your board meets in 23 days, get your master's in 23 days. It had to been like, hey, in 2 years time, this is going to change. That's fine. The rules of the game change, but allow people the appropriate amount of time to then absorb the rules and then go play the game, I think.
Well, does anybody know the promotion rate from 04 to 05? Like, let's just refer in the fighter community specifically, because that's really all we care about. Like, do we know what the promotion rates are? Like, is this going to even change?
We care about everybody, Vader.
Yeah,
that was so not inclusive, Vader.
Yeah.
Jeez, we're really going to edit that one out.
Yeah. But the reality is, like, are they hemorrhaging people so much that it's not going to matter? Like, are they going to say like, you need your masters, but then when they have like 20% of the 80% of people they need to promote have a master's, are they going to be like, yeah, well, we're promoting them anyway? I don't know.
I can't imagine that I think they're struggling to have enough lieutenant colonels in the first place. So we'll have to see, I guess, but my guess is it won't be a huge factor probably for line of the Air Force. I don't know. But what I was going to say is what it does show, or my beef with it, and probably Satan's beef also, is that they're just not good at valuing individuals anyway. You know what I mean? So they don't value, or they don't take into account that if it takes resources and time to get a master's degree, right? So if they want their highest performing pilots in the squadron to continue to be the highest performing IPs and weapons officers or whatever. It's not like they allocate those guys time to go get a master's degree. They don't, right? They already burn those guys out anyway. So to put on top of that, what they're already demanding from their top performers, this other thing, you either get one or two things. Those guys aren't going to do it and they're going to get out of the Air Force. And then you lose your best guys, or they're going to burn their house down and their family relations down to get it. And they're going to get something probably worthless. So they're just wasting resources that way. So that's not good. And then they're going to get out and you're going to lose those guys in the long term. Anyway, so they're just not good. This decision is not, at least on the surface, it's not a good use of managing resources, right, from your people. They're already struggling to keep the best guys that there are, and they're not keeping them. Like my squadron is full of awesome, like the top performers from like the weapons school. Like they're all flooding into the hill reserves, other reserve units. And so they just can't afford to do that. Like they got to be smarter about how they how they value the time of the people who they actually want to be the leaders in the future. And this isn't that, it's not going to have that effect.
Yeah, I'm sure the Secretary of the Air Force was not intending to give the middle finger to all the bros who are struggling out there to hack the mission and everything. But in a lot of ways, that's how it was received. And it's just one of those deals where the intent, I'm sure, was positive to try to be beneficial to certain people and to, like I said earlier, promote education among the officer cadre to go fight 5th and 6th gen wars against China or Russia or whoever, right? Because you need smart people to do that. You need expertise, but ultimately the second and third order side effects from this decision is going to be, I think, largely negative on retention, on getting the right people promoted, and it's just going to open the door for a lot more bad than good to occur.
Yeah, it's like you want, like, and again, we've said this, the horse is dead, but it's like you want the engineer who's working at Right Pat, who's developing the next gen weapon X, Y, or Z. Part of his career or her career progression should be at year X, you're going to go get a master's or a PhD from some high level institution, and then you're going to come back and keep building awesome things. But as like a knuckle dragging fighter pilot, the majority of us don't need that to do what we are paid to go do. You need go getting reps in jets and studying in the vault, etc. Not going to get some Liberty University, which I just lost as a sponsor of this podcast, to get a master's degree, or Jacksonville State, go Gamecocks, where I got my master's degree. Like it, zero value add. It just took away time from honing my skill, took away time from family, burned out. And now again, like Bender said, you're going to force the people you need to be leaders in the future of the Air Force because they didn't get promoted. And I know, like this, everyone in here probably has a story. And I remember right when I was leaving, there was a guy at Shaw who was a DO that did not get picked up for 05. So for Lieutenant Colonel, for those listening. And he showed me his record. She's like, well, maybe he just had like a one-off. The guy had been a distinguished graduate of like 4 courses, all the things that we know don't really matter, but do matter when it comes to promotion board, like stratifications and awards. The guy had all those, but when it came down to it, there were 3 other guys who were just as good as him. And unfortunately, they only had 3 guys they could give a definitely promote to, and he got a promote because they also had to spread the wealth out amongst the other career fields on base so that, 75% of the people get a definitely promote. And that goes on your promotion recommendation form. Again, for those who aren't familiar. And if you get a promote, while you think that sounds good, that's kind of like, he's an average or she's an average. And it might or might not be true. It's just when it comes down to it, it's a numbers game of who's authorized or the number they're getting promoted at Congress. This just goes on and on and on and on. I don't know.
I think
frustrating.
One of the things that the timing is just odd.
Yeah.
Because if we were just like, packed to the gills with people who wanted to stay in and people who were like vying for higher ranks, you would think like, oh man, this is a good way to kind of just create an easy delineation between who we want to keep around and who we don't. But the retention is not awesome currently. And so you just wonder, like, what was a driving force? I know the MFR or whatever the paper said, like, hey, this is our posturing, this is our way to show that we, to our enemies, that we value, thinkers and people who can help us innovate for the next war. But it's like, I feel like there's other ways that they could have done that to try to posture or demonstrate that, which I don't know.
I mean, there are certain, like test pilot school, right? That's a great example of a very focused master's degree for a purpose. And then, the guys that go there, like Sonic Kirkman, he just got hired by our unit. But the guy he's freaking brilliant. Went to, whatever test pilot school, where did they go? They go get a master's somewhere. I can't remember where, but, and then comes back and he's like the lead F-35 test pilot or whatever. And he just did the accident or the safety investigation board for the F-35 that crashed up here at Hill. But like to hear him like brief that and to show like everything that he went into to like find the root source of the problem and stuff. I mean, I've never heard a SIB like that ever in my career in the Air Force. Like, it was amazing. I'm like, dude, that guy is, he's got to be like one of the top 10 minds in the Air Force, probably. You know what I mean? And so there is a way to like leverage people like that. And I think test pilot school is one way that we do it pretty well. But we don't do it well outside of that. And it's not like, the MFR says like, we want, for China or whatever, like those guys are all smart. We want to get smarter or whatever. But like you said, an EMS degree from Jacksonville State, where I got mine from,
Go
I have
Gamecocks.
international relations master's degree from St. Mary's, which sounds like a pretty great university. It's St. Mary's, San Antonio, which, still a good university. As far as I don't even know I think it's the Roadrunners, but anyway, that's not doing a whole, like, I don't think China is shaking in their boots because Bender has a, international relations degree.
In the end, it's going to be one of the guys you are flying with on a daily basis who's like a weapons officer, a much more valuable human being than me. And I guarantee I'm gonna get promoted, but I have my master's degree. But that's something so silly. It's like you got a guy who's out there like honing his skills, sharpening the knife to go fight the next fight, and like, oh, done his master's, but this guy has a master's in emergency management. Let's promote him. It's like that makes no sense whatsoever. We'll see how it plays out.
We here at the Kodiak Shack podcast would like to welcome our new sponsor, Adamus Cyber. Working with the military means there are some minimum cybersecurity requirements that are in every contract. Complying with these requirements can be painfully slow and really take your company's focus off your military customers and end users. Thankfully, the team at Adamus has simplified the process exclusively for small businesses working with the military. It should be expected that security requirements are going to be a part of working with the military, but they don't have to be difficult. Learn why prior guests on the podcast like Arun from Ops Lab or Brian from ResCon use Adamus to comply with the NIST 800-171, DFARS 7012, and CMMC cybersecurity requirements in their contracts. Check out their website at www.adamuscyber.com and tell them you heard about them from the Kodiak Shack podcast. Their website will be in the show notes. We appreciate all the companies that want to work with the military, and we understand working with the government isn't always the easiest thing, but we appreciate companies like Adamus that make it just a little bit easier. Yeah, I wonder, because the weapons officer it's not counted in any higher education, right? It's just like, hey, you've stratified being a weapons officer, even though it's a 6-month course, at least for, the F-16 stuff, like, or, most fighter things, 6 months course. That's pretty nut crushing, it sounds. But.
Yeah. And then they got to spend the next 1 to 3 years of their life just getting punched in the throat in the fighter squadron, like going to conferences, working 15-hour days, like dissertation after dissertation, like that you probably should value that person more. And it just seems like it's not always the case.
So Satan, go ahead.
Well, I wonder what the status of the A10 community is, because I think this is one, like, I don't know, first, like Bender and Vader, what you guys thought. Like, I always thought the A10 community had the highest morale of any of the fighter community. And I think while it might not be much better, I think the retention rate was slightly higher than other fighter career. Like the Viper, I think was the worst by far. And it just got crushed. So I'm curious to A10 status of the A10 community, what your thoughts are. And then if you're willing to share, some of your life changes and what the rationale is behind that. You don't have to, but
Yeah, no, it's all good. I appreciate the sentiment. Yeah, we in the A10 community have prided ourselves for a while on having a pretty good, good dude or bro to non-bro ratio. I think my man Mobag described it as we're the social lubricants of the Air Force. Like we can, make friends with the Viper guy, the Raptor guy, and the Intel guy, and the space nerd, and all those guys, and just all hang out and have a beer and have a good time and go win wars and all that stuff. But yeah, right now I would say morale is not super great in the community. Not great, Bob, if you will.
pretty darn good.
The future of the jet is very much in doubt right now. I mean, that's always been the case. 10 years ago, I remember being at Moody, and the chief of staff of the Air Force sat us all down in the mass briefing room for both squadrons and basically told us that we were done. The Air Force is getting rid of the A-10, and that was that. Well, he's gone, and we're still here. But the difference between then and now is we had a lot more political support in Congress. We had, Senator McCain, Senator Ayotte, Martha McSally, a number of pretty big name politicians who were willing to go to bat for the airframe and make hold the Air Force's feet to the fire with the CAS mission and say, look, if you're going to get rid of this platform, what are you going to do to backfill it? Like, you either need to have an honest to goodness capability that can meet or exceed the needs of the warfighter out there, or we're not going to let you do this until you do. Well, now that's no longer the case. I mean, you saw in the last week, you can barely elect a Speaker of the House, let alone, who knows what's going to happen later in the year when it comes to budgets and debt ceilings and all those other things. So the last NDA that just got passed officially divested from one squadron worth of A-10s. The Fort Wayne Guard guys are switching from A-10s to Vipers, which honestly is fine. They've been trying to do that for years, and hey, good for you. They got given Vipers, I think, against they were given A-10s really against their will. But that's the first domino to fall unit-wise in terms of the A-10s getting ready to shut down. For the Guard and Reserve side specifically, my squadron was informed, our whole unit here was informed this past weekend that per the Air Force roadmap, this unit, the Reserve B course that I fly in and teach in, is slated to shut down at the end of fiscal 25. So September 2025, the squadron would be no more. The last squadron, we were supposed to be the last squadron standing, but they swapped us around with Whiteman. So now Whiteman will be the last guys around, at least on the reserve side. And then, so we'll kind of see what happens. That is a little bit shorter of a timeline than I think what a lot of people were anticipating. And I mean, with the end of GWAT effectively and everything, there's not really a huge push to have a dedicated CAS platform that's out there every day doing the mission. But yeah, it's a tough time to be an A-10 pilot Air Force. I still love it. It's great. If you're out there in pilot training and you get selected to fly the A-10, do not despair. You're going to learn a lot of great stuff, and the skills that you acquire in this community will carry you through the rest of your career, because I think the biggest difference between our community and the others that are out there is we have, a support the ground warfighter mindset. We care about the guy on the ground. Our mission is the 18-year-old kid with a rifle in the mud getting shot at, and it's our job to go and save him. That's all we really care about and think about. And as long as you're going to fight wars with people in it and not have, Terminator robots or whatever, that's going to be something that is of value to the Air Force. But yeah, it's a frustrating time. We can go way deeper into that topic if you want, in terms of future warfare, who's in charge of CAS, who, should the Army get A-10s or whatever, or should the Army be in charge of its own close air support air assets? But it's definitely a time of change for us, and definitely challenging for a lot of folks.
I know they're having discussions about. Sorry, they're like we're talking. Like ACE is the buzzword right now, right in the Air Force. So Agile Combat Employment, I think is what it stands for. But like going, I don't know how much. Anyway, if we're talking like islands and stuff and beachheads, things like that, they were talking in a meeting that we were having the other day. But they were talking about like the A-10's role. Like they're like, we have to have this many for like counter beach landings or whatever. And I was like, holy hell, like that would be a sick mission. Like, heck yeah, like nobody could do better than an A-10. Like, can you imagine like A-10s rolling up and down the beach? So I think there's definitely nobody else that could do something like that, right? As far as I know, like nobody could. I know an F-35 couldn't do that. Vipers do pretty, they can strafe pretty well-ish, if you're looking for kind of a wide area to hit.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And nothing hardened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nothing hardened. So keeping them survivable, like talk to me about that. So I know like that's what we talk about when we talk about like Vipers not being able to survive high-end fights. And they're much more capable of survival probably than an A-10. Maybe at least that's what we think. But you tell me, like, can an A-10 get to that fight where he's protecting, beaches in certain areas where things need to be protected?
Beaches may be a little challenging. As far as the South Pacific fight goes, I think our best role is just rolling heavy with mauled. It's not currently integrated on the jet, but we can carry 12 of them on each airplane, which is as many as the B-52, and so you get a 4-ship of A-10s with 48 mauled, that's going to be pretty overwhelming to any A2AD or anti-axis aerial denial for those of you at home who aren't full up on that. That's the short acronym for basically the super MES, or the lots of surface-to-air missile threats, and China basically trying to keep other people out of their little island chains out there. But that's a thing that we can do. We can hang around the battle space for a really long time. We can carry a lot of stuff, and we can kind of deconflict your battle space for you. So you can, if you were to do that, you could easily overwhelm the enemy with that. If you put JASM on it, you could have 4 JASM and 8 mauled on each airplane. That's a lot. I'm not full up on what the other platforms out there can carry, but it's a good amount of weaponry. But all those integration processes take time and money, and the Air Force doesn't really seem to be interested in either one of those things right now. So, but yeah, we could do the island thing. We could, the plane's got big, wide wheelbase, big wheels. We can off-road with the best of them, land from on highways and dirt strips and stuff like that. In terms of survivability, yeah, the Air Force in general, and you can talk about this if you want, it seems to have, a while ago, it seems to have moved away from electronic warfare as a priority, and went kind of all in on stealth with a lot of stuff. And I'll alibi that I'm just a knuckle dragging A-10 dude. I don't have all the fancy read-ins that some 5th gen guys have. That's one of those things that we just don't necessarily get a lot of access to. But there are things that are out there that would make us more survivable if we just spent, I would say, a modest amount of money on it. And the other misnomer, I think it's a talking point or misnomer or whatever you want to call it, is, yeah, the A-10 by itself in certain situations is definitely not survivable. Neither is the Viper, but we've never gone to war like that. We always force package. We always have, different people doing their jobs specifically for what is best suited for their airframe. Use the right tool for the right job, right? So in a combined fight like that, I'd say we're survivable. We can definitely contribute to the fight for sure, but it's just not in the current interest of the Air Force right now. We're kind of getting treated like Milton on Office Space, where they just stop. We're just going to stop sustainment. We're going to stop. Your data link's going to expire in 2 years. We're going to have these wings where we're not going to install them. We're fixing the glitch. It'll be okay. We're just going to put you in the basement right now, and we'll let you know when we need you.
Yeah, I think two things. Now that I'm an air dominance guy, because I'm a C model guy now, so when you're kind of defending, and this is kind of holdover from being a seed guy, defending platforms and kind of moving, the entire group into a target area or into an AOR, and then moving back out. The problem set is flying slow. So whether it's a C-130 or a helicopter or an A-10, like if anybody's not keeping like 0.9 Mach or higher, it complicates the problem set. But so I think that is one of the tough parts, is like, how do we protect the A-10s? How do we as an entire package protect them? But then the other side, which I think a lot of people miss out, is we always talk about A-10s and CAS, and like a lot of people do CAS, and no one does CAS as well as the A-10. But the one thing that no one else does is the Sandy mission, that we don't have a fix. We don't have another platform. Like everybody else is like, well, we can kind of part task, like we'll make CAS work, but nobody is like, hey, we're going to make Sandy work. And so Satan,
Don't
like,
get
what do
shut
you,
down.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah. Well, maybe Bender doesn't have to worry. But
Questions?
So Satan, can you kind of, just for people who don't understand what the Sandy mission is, and then can you kind of talk to how the A-10 fills it, and then who could theoretically pick that up?
Yeah, so the Sandy mission is kind of shorthand. It's the call sign that the flying call sign that A-10s use when you're doing a combat search and rescue mission. So somebody gets shot down behind enemy lines, you got to go out, you got to find them, you got to protect them, and you got to protect the rescue vehicle assets, usually a HH-60 helicopter or an MV-22 or something like that. So you got to fight your way in, find the guy, fight your way in, protect them long enough to pick up the person, and then get out of it. And so the A-10 community is really the only Air Force asset that is rescue mission commander certified. Like we have an official training program for it. It's the Sandy 1 upgrade is difficult. I went through the Sandy 1 upgrade 8 years ago or so. Very challenging. Got some funny. One of the best debriefs ever was one of my Sandy 1 upgrade debriefs. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, maybe if we got time. But yeah, so we're the only guys that do that, and there really isn't another platform that is out there that is really well equipped to do it, because we have all the different radios on board the jet that can interrogate the survival radio with just via data, not voice. So I can get a good solid GPS location from a survival radio. If that's broken, I can still triangulate. Everybody in the formation can kind of go out and do kind of what you guys do with the HTS pod and triangulate and find, via ellipses where the person's at on the ground and still find them. We can hang around long enough in the battle space to, do all this stuff while integrating with all the other assets that are out there. And we've got all the radios and equipment and everything for it. Nobody else really does that. The few times that they've tried to do it with other platforms, it just doesn't really work out too well. The HA60 community, great dudes that are really good at what they do, but because you're flying at 50 feet, you can't really talk to everybody. You can't be an effective mission commander of a force package if you can't talk to everyone. And when you're that low, communication is pretty tough. HC-130s, yeah, maybe, but they're pretty slow. They're not going to be able to go, over the fence and see what they can see without, being at a huge risk, just because they're slow and vulnerable, and they don't really have any offensive or too many defensive weapons available to them. 10 years ago, when the A-10 was first slated to go away, they did do, at the 422 at Nellis, they did start doing some science experiments, if you will, about who would be the best platform to take the Sandy role. And the two that I am at least currently aware of, it was Vipers and it was Strike Eagles. And I think most people initially thought that the Strike Eagle would be better because you got two people, you got a lot more gas, more legs, you can, integrate and talk to everybody, you got more firepower. But my understanding, without getting into too many details, is that the Viper actually performed better. I think some of that had to do with the division of labor in that airplane. But it basically took 8 Vipers rotating through, the various Sandy rolls, just based off of loiter time, to be as effective as 4 A-10s in the CSAR roll. And so, yeah, that just really all I'm asking for the Air Force is to have an honest discussion of, okay, who's going to take the mantle of this? And if nobody is the answer, then is that a risk that people are willing to accept, that the taxpayer is willing to accept, that fighter pilots are willing to accept, because it's going to be that much more difficult to get picked up behind enemy lines. I've seen various things in the news about from senior Air Force leaders kind of alluding to the fact that the CSAR mission may now be too risky, just with the current threat lowdown and everything like that. And I mean,
don't get shot down.
Don't get shot down. Yeah, don't get shot down. We'll send you. I think the solution, the short answer is we'll send you a rocket pack or an Iron Man suit or something. We'll send on a little hypersonic missile package, and you just strap that on, and you can effect your own rescue that way. But this is a mission that was kind of born in the fires of Vietnam, and there a lot of lessons were learned in blood. And between that and the CAS mission, I think a lot of expertise is going to get lost, and you're just going to have to pay for those lessons in blood all over again if nobody retains that knowledge in the culture and the community here.
I got 2 things real quick. I'm going to say what you didn't say, which is surprising, that the Viper obviously performed better. But I mean, a Strike Eagle, twice the people, half the SA. That is a divisor. So I said it, and it's out there. But also, again, this is why I have a master's degree. Is we're hearing about the A-10 and survivability, 0.9 Mach, yada, 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 got to go fast. We've also talked about the next generation air dominance fighter. So I propose we get the Army involved in the development of the next generation air dominance fighter, where Paco said they're all going to be tailless. We know they'll put a tail on it because just like the F-35, we didn't need a canopy bow, but we got a 5th-gen fighter that can do helicopter things. Now you got a canopy bow. So they'll just do something, just completely bastardize NGAD, and, it'll do the A-10 mission. So there you go. Problem solved.
And, Satan, I know you didn't do this on purpose, but you're talking to 3 original F-16 guys who pride themselves on being able to do multiple roles. And then hearing that the F-16 could handle Sandy, I was like, yes, like my F-16 heart was was overflowing. And you think, I think a lot of people, this is kind of just sidebar. A lot of people think F-16s are every base, just all the mission sets, but that's not reality. And I think that's what the F-16 has done relatively well, is like they have specific bases that focus on SEAD, suppression of enemy air defenses. They have specific bases that focus on AI, like air interdiction, and they have specific bases that focus on CAS. So I think it would be, something similar to that, where, hey, you have your Block 30 bases, your jets that are primarily CAS guys. They would probably be the closest thing you could get to a relative replacement to an A-10. Because again, the F-16 is not going to do it better, but it's the next best option, And I think that's we'll have to do it, because not picking us up, we can't just go and steal F-14s like in Top Gun Maverick, I mean, theoretically.
Out with that attitude.
Yeah. They're trying to
It's going to win Best Picture. You heard it here first. Best Picture nominee.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It was a great movie.
Start an air cart. Could anyone start an air cart?
Nope.
Yeah, you just do this, and somebody, something happens.
Swap it over. Yeah.
I was my dirty little secret is I was an F-16 test engineer in my previous life as a civilian, and so I actually could probably remember how to start a Dash 60 cart if I had a gun in my head. We'll see.
I'm hoping maybe it's a country where F-16s have been sold there or stolen there at some point.
It probably will be.
Yeah.
It's not, the thing is, you don't buy. So if the critique of the A-10 is that it's not survivable in a high-end mez, an F-16 circling around a survivor trying to protect them is equally as unsurvivable in a high-end mez as an A-10 is. In fact, it's probably less survivable, to be honest. Moving fast has advantages if you're doing it for a specific purpose. It makes you a little bit more survivable. But moving slow probably makes you a little bit more survivable in a mission like a sandy mission. Anyway, so the reason why the F-16 would take that role on is only because they want to, they're trying to divest of the A-10. It's not because the F-16 has any kind of benefit that the A-10 doesn't have. So it doesn't solve the problem, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like, the problem is still there. It's an unsurvivable mission for F-16s. It's a completely undoable mission for F-35. There's no way F-35s could be seen. I mean, they have a lot of SA and a lot of loiter time and all that, but it's the same thing. A turning F-35 is vulnerable. You know what I mean? It's just it's the nature of the beast. So all those advantages that we get from LO and all that stuff, it's just not made for that mission. So we got to figure out something that can.
Well, you got to pick the guy up. And remember, like, the Air Force initially was going to buy HH-60 whiskey models, and they started rolling that out at Moody. I think the original purchase was like 123, something like that. And then they slash in half, basically, because they've said this is an unsurvivable mission. I mean, if it takes 4 hours, and I can, talk, Syria, right? We're all there. When the Jordanian went down when we were there, it was a 4.5 hour flight to pick him up. And then they started moving things forward. But even still, like, there's some areas you're operating that, best case scenario, maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours that they're going to pick you up, which that's flying into an environment that doesn't have crazy double digit surface air missiles and integrated air defenses and yada, yada, yada. So maybe it goes back to, like, objective 1, don't get shot down. And 2, whatever it is the mission is of that day, be a champion. It's not a good, it's not a good spot to be.
No, you want to go down over the water probably in that fight for sure. Like, if you go over the land, like, just enjoy the food. I guess.
Deal with the sharks? Are you kidding me? I've seen Jaws. The one of the guys in my TX now, he's an A-10 guy from Fort Wayne. He's transitioned into the C model, which that is a challenging change. Like, he said he has no bad habits because he has no habits at all. So he but he was saying, at least at Fort Wayne, maybe at other A-10 bases, but he said, I think it was every sortie or almost every sortie, he shot the gun. And I was like, that is a great way to keep morale high. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you're just like every day, like, 400 rounds, no big deal. Like, that's pretty awesome. Like, that's a good technique for keeping fighter pilots happy.
Oh, it's great. Yeah. I savor every trigger pull I get because Rain was alluding to it earlier, but I've made some life choices coming up here where I'm probably going to stop flying the A-10 later this year. But no, it's awesome. The standard is 200 rounds every CT sortie, and then if the syllabus drives it, it's you get 360 or sometimes more. At WIC, they get to shoot combat mix as opposed to just the target practice rounds that pretty much everybody else shoots. A-10 WIC is, I think, the most expensive WIC because everything's real. It's all lives all the time. You got to shoot, high fidelity targets. You're dropping everything in the inventory, and it's a blast. We love making fun of you guys up at 30,000 feet playing, your laser tag games. Pew pew, got you. No, oh yeah, huh? When really all we're doing is just shacking metal on metal. High explosive. Maverick missiles going off, just fire and death every day, all day, and we love it. It's great. That is definitely a point of pride in the community, and definitely something that, like I said, all you youngins out there looking to maybe still fly the A-10 before it goes away, you're going to get plenty of opportunities to drop and shoot. So don't sweat it.
Yeah, and when we graduated Viper B course, we went down to the range down in Arizona or whatever, and the Vipers did a couple passes, which it's awesome to see Vipers do passes. But then the A-10s rolled in, and they did I don't know how low you guys go. It's like 75 feet. So they look like they're, we're standing pretty close to the target. those guys came in at 75 feet or whatever. And I had my little kids, and the first one that just opened the gun, I kid you not, it knocked down my 2-year-old. Like, it literally flattened her on her back. Everybody else just like screamed in terror, and she couldn't like talk for like 2 minutes. It was like, holy crap. It was awesome. So no, I mean, it's terrifying, like nobody's going to do anything for a couple minutes probably if there's an A-10 shooting at it.
Yeah, and that's again the other difference maker in any kind of a ground fight is, if you're a kid getting shot at from bad guys, and then Hog shows up and starts laying down 30 millimeter, you're just like, holy crap, this, like, my will to fight is renewed. If you're on the receiving end of that, you're like, I need to get out of here because I ain't gonna last long. It's a game changer. It absolutely is. And that's something that nobody else can really do as effectively as we can. So like I said, we'll see what happens in the future. Holding out hope for the A10E Skyraider 2 acquisition program, like what the Navy did with Super Hornets. Maybe you can backdoor a 4.5 gen cast platform that looks and smells a lot like an A10, but no, we'll see. It's a fun mission for sure.
Yeah, I was talking to some guy. We were at SOS, and I think he was trying to like slight me. He was a good dude, but he was just making a joke. And he was like, "Okay, so the F-16 has a 20 millimeter cannon." I was like, "That's right." And he's like, "And the A-10 is a 30 millimeter cannon." I was like, "That's right." And he's like, "So if you do the math, it's not just like 10 millimeter larger. It's like 100% larger of like the overall bullet size." And I was like, yeah, that checks. Like you are correct. And it doesn't even hurt my feelings. Like I am impressed with it as well. Like it is. Well, you look at, like the A10s use their gun on buildings and, they're like, oh, you got somebody in the building. I'll just shoot them inside, and you're like the F-16 and it looks like someone's setting off M80s on the roof and the A10 shoots it and it's like Swiss cheese. And you're, holy smokes. All right. Good work. Solid gun.
I watched one A10 on the strafe and it hit. Oh, it was just a single round that hit this ISIS individual who then like no longer existed after. But I mean, you're shooting forearms at people that have grenades.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It'd be a fun gun to shoot just once, maybe
Yeah.
twice.
That's
I
always
don't
my
know
favorite ride in the B course is when the test pilot school guys come out and they get one ride in the A10 and there's like a run card thing that they got to do with a bunch of nerdy stuff on it, but most of them just scoff it and just go straight to the range and just, we're just going to shoot all the bullets. We're going to ripple the pot of rockets. I always try to negotiate with the top three to give them some extra rounds. It's always fun. It's A10 appreciation day for them for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah, what's the gun pod? The F-35 gun pods for the Navy and Marines. They might only be 25 millimeter, but they might be 30 millimeter. I'll have to look that up. That'd be pretty.
I think it's more 25.
Is it
I think
They tried to do
25.
the 30 millimeter. I think they tried a 30 millimeter pod on the Viper way back in Gulf War I times when they did that weird Delta version like F-16 XL and all the other stuff. But I mean, you can't it's when you try to strap something like that onto a jet, it's just you run into so many engineering problems, accuracy problems, vibration problem, all that stuff, and it's just nowhere near as effective as a purpose-built gun with wings and engines on it, and it's just super accurate and super effective.
Yeah, I think the coolest part too is like the flight controls locking out on the A10 when you pull the trigger is like half detent. The flight controls lock out. I could really use that in the Viper on strafing.
I
Just
think
Zorro the target.
I think you got it. So shout out to my homies at the 416th still doing the Lord's work out there, but I'm pretty sure it was called like Death Claw or something, where it basically does the same thing where it engages the autopilot of the jet on the first detent and effectively locks the pipper onto whatever you've got it on the ground, and it'll dampen out any turbulence or whatever that's impacting your aim, and it just makes for way more accurate shots. So I don't know which blocks or variants got that, but I think it's pretty effective is my understanding.
Yeah, turbulence is always affecting me on the strafing run. That's the issue. So I need a turbulence dampening flight control logic.
It wasn't the fact that I was 450 knots trying to extend the speed brakes while I'm trying to shoot the gun.
Right.
And
with the flight control logic, the flight control logic switch over like what 425 or something?
Yeah, it's the 0.7 to 0.9 Mach. Yeah. So once you got above that, it was all over the place.
Yep. That was my issue every time.
Yeah, that's Death Claw.
It's got a good spread though. I mean, I killed some stuff with the gun. I just had to, hit a lot of empty space first, but eventually I found the thing.
Well, that's why you got 100 rounds per second, instead of 70 rounds per second. You need a few extra rounds per second. The one thing I saw, I've never obviously flown the A10, but just kind of looking at the cockpit, is out the front of the A10, there's a lot of hardware. I mean, you've got like the HUD and the arms, and then you've got like the I don't know what the glass kind of combining or the bars that are holding it, but it doesn't look like the visibility out the front is awesome. I would assume.
It's like a football helmet, man. You just gotta,
Yeah.
just put on the helmet. You got all the bars and stuff in the way, but it's there for a purpose. So the A10 is built to take damage. Like unlike most other airplanes that you rely on stealth or speed or maneuverability or whatever. Like we're built to take hits. We assume that we're getting shot at every time we go over the target. We assume we're probably going to take hits out there, and that's what the jet was built for. You got the titanium bathtub. The front windscreen is designed to take anything up to your design. It's the whole thing is designed to take up to 23 millimeter and still keep going. So yeah, the forward viz isn't nearly what you get in the Viper or a lot of other platforms that are out there, but you just kind of get used to it. You're not, most of the time you're not necessarily looking forward. You're kind of offset, holding to the side or whatever, or you're wheeling it up and you're just looking over the rail. And the viz on that is great because the cockpit is so much forward of the wing. It's a weird thing that most people don't think about, but if you ended up ever flying like the T6 or the Super Tucano or any of those planes, like that are supposed to do, counterinsurgency casts or things like that, it's a lot trickier than it is in the A10 because you can't just bank and orbit over the target and still see because the wing is right there. So it's all built with a purpose. It's a great designed airplane, and probably never seen anything like it again, unfortunately.
If we're talking football helmets, I feel like the F-16 is the canopy is like that old football kicker helmet where it was just like one bar down here. That was like all it had. Didn't really protect you for much, but darn, the visibility was good. Does the A10 do left-hand wheels or right-hand wheels?
We right now are a right-hand wheel community. It used to be left-hand, but then again, a bunch of smart guys doped out. Hey, we should put the targeting pod on the right side because like if the left engine seizes and this and that happens, blah blah blah, they'll go out of control. So they started putting the pod on the right side. Yeah, started putting them on the right side about 10 years ago. That's what we did.
Could you imagine making like people change, like, hey, you're gonna put the radar over your right knee? Like,
yeah. Oh man,
I don't know what Bender again. I think it plugs into the back of his head and he just like reads what's happening. But it's like we had to switch like MFDs where the radar was, like it would be uproar.
Yeah. Well, Bender does.
Undoable.
So I just assumed everybody did right-hand wheels because A10s do right-hand wheels, F-16s do right-hand wheels, and then I was like, Hornets and Strike Eagles do left-hand wheels, is my understanding. Somebody will fact check that.
Well,
so
that's the problem with the Strike Eagle that we found it. That's the root cause.
Makes
there you go.
sense now.
I think I
Really
believe
lost all
they
your
do
Strike Eagle
left-hand.
listeners. Dang it! Sorry.
Oh God.
Well,
Love the Strike Eagle.
Rain started it.
I had to say it. Satan didn't say it. He was going to say it, but it had to be said.
Bender, does the 35, I mean, like cast wheel with the weird pod under the nose, not weird, sorry, the pod under the nose,
The super advanced pod under the nose.
Yes, correct. You are correct.
That's like 6 generations less advanced than all of your pods.
Well, it's funny. The rest of the glass is like very smooth, and that one is the opposite. But I understand why. So, left-hand wheel, right-hand wheel.
We are ambidextrous as far as wheels go.
Oh. So just like, we're hanging out with Hornets today, we'll do left-hand wheels. We're Vipers today, we'll go right-hand wheel.
Yeah, and we'll miss whatever we're trying to hit on either left-hand wheels or right-hand wheels. Yeah, it's pretty tough. Like I haven't done a whole lot of casts. We will wheel it up if we're gonna do like high angle strafe and stuff, and then you just kind of make it happen, which is fun. But we don't do BSA and stuff, which is tragic because that's a fun mission. So we don't spend a lot of time doing that. I'm trying to think if it's just it's just not made to. And if I spent a lot of time doing it, I could probably figure it out. But in the F-16, it was like great. You had the HSI, and you did have whatever arrow pointed at the thing, and it gave you like your miles away, so you always knew where you were in relation to the target. The F-35, like it's just not. it's a lot of effort to try to get that kind of information. And so just staying in a 5 to 10 mile wheel around something, like I have not been super successful up to this point. So there are different challenges. It's just not made to do that. Like in the F-16, which isn't made to do that like an like an A-10 is, but even the F-16 was much more, it was much more convenient in that regard. Though, so we don't do a lot of wheels now, but we do have GBU-12s, which is great. It's a very 5th gen weapon. You want to get in there like LO, and then right when you're like 10 miles from the target, you want to open your doors, you want to like release this bomb and then lays it in. It's great. It's awesome.
Super LO.
Yeah. What are some of with the A-10, because it's got one mission set, so it can get really good at it. What are some of the trends that students, at the FTU kind of struggle with when they're trying to figure out air-to-ground life?
It's a little bit of everything. Usually it's the biggest thing is just kind of the task management piece. So we try to make it a pretty straightforward building block approach where we're just going to teach you how to do like one thing decently at a time. And then by the time you get to the end of the cast phase, we start task loading them with, all right, I'm going to give you a position change, a frequency change, and tell you to fence in, and you got to figure out how to do all that at the same time. And so that's usually where people struggle. It generally students do pretty well. Going back to some of the earlier topics that you guys were talking about in previous bro chats with the whole UPT, 2.5 and everything. We had students that struggled with basic airmanship for a while. I think the root cause on that was largely COVID and just poor flying continuity and everything that kind of happened because of COVID largely. But since then, things I think have leveled out pretty well. We've started getting some UPT 2.5 people in the last couple classes. I haven't really been keeping track of who's who intentionally, just so that, we can go to the end and be like, okay, who's what, and who went through what course, and be somewhat surprised and not have any biases or anything like that. But really just like the first time you point at the ground when you're going to drop a bomb or shoot the gun is definitely an emotional event for a lot of folks. And just having, going through that mental checklist of, okay, what's my dive angle? Where's the target? What am I still legal to drop? All right, how do I maneuver the airplane to get to where it's going? And oh, by the way, airspeed's increasing rapidly during this whole thing, and it's getting louder and louder because of the wind and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's that's definitely I think an early challenge for students to just kind of building their mental shot clock of what they can do and either down the chute or in the hold when you're getting a bunch of nuggets down tasks and things like that, because we still fly primarily visual formations. We're not like everybody else who flies like sensor line and spread formations where you're relying on radar SA or link SA or anything like that. We still generally fly visual formations for the most part, at least at the B course level, and then kind of ramp things up from there.
I did Red Air for A-10 ACM, so air combat maneuvering, because A-10 still trained to kind of air to air, because if you get rolled up, you need to know how to defend yourself. And it definitely made me, even though I knew it was training, it made me concerned for my life when the A-10 guys were like, cool, so we'll consider a valid gun kill as a 2-second track. And I was like, oh my gosh, like how many 30 millimeter do you need to kill me in an F-16? But it seemed excessive for 2 seconds of 30 millimeter on my jet. And I was like, okay, I mean, you got to shoot every piece of the airplane.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
only
mean,
a few frames, I think.
Shiv had a Viper and a Raptor on the side of his jet because Loco and I went out, and Loco flying the Raptor. We went out and did high aspect BFM. And so the first time fighting Shiv, like, well, he's an A-10, so I'm just going to go straight up once we hit the merge. And turns out old Shiv